Shaw.
Now, Miss Shaw, that is a matter of opinion. There is no reason that it will not also come through Fort Steele. Now, excuse me, I have to... Now, sir. No, don't go away, sir. I have something to tell you. What would you say, sir, to a town on a navigable river? To the east, countless square miles of black coal just waiting to be gathered. To the west, one of the most valuable silver lead mines in the country. A city, sir, straddling a shining river with steel. The rail...
Glorious empire, which is based upon and built upon fair play. It is that same fair play, enjoyed by us all, that I ask you to afford me, so that I may prove to you that the government has steered the good ship of state in a seaman-like manner and brought her safely into port.
Safely into port? Fort Steele has been ruined by you. How about some fair play for us?
Hear, hear.
I am addressing the voting public. Even if you are not a lady, at least have the decency to try to act like one.
I'll act like one when I am treated like one. You have constantly voted against women's suffrage in Parliament. How can you defend
cares about
such
women's
a
suffrage?
stand?
If you will allow me a word, I shall be happy to address that topic.
Now, hold your horse.
I'm talking to Richard Patterson, who is from Victoria. Richard, would you tell us a little bit about your business here at Fort Steele and about the crowds that you have seen this summer?
Well, our job here is to create living history, to show the people today that the people back in the 1890s had basically the same problems that people are hollering about now. We've been fairly successful this year. Everybody seems to like us. People follow us around all day. So the size of the crowds, up until the July 15th, the price change, we were actually ahead by several thousand people. And since then, our average has just dropped a little bit under what it had been before the price change.
Do you contribute that directly to the gate admissions?
Well, the drop happened the same day. So, and the only big upsurge in attendance happened to be on a day when there was free admission.
Does this affect you personally?
Not really. My job depends on having a crowd. But, we can adjust to the size of the crowd. We've always had crowds. It's just that they are noticeably smaller.
I'm speaking to Tink Robinson at Fort Steele. Tink, could you tell me how the gate admissions at Fort Steele have affected the attendance here in the park?
Well, Wendy, for the first 2 weeks that the park was open this summer, there were no gate fees, and we were running 1,000 people ahead of last year each week. Since the fees have been put in place, we are losing more than 1,000 people a week. So it has really hurt our attendance. We were projecting to play to 50,000 people. We will be lucky to play to about 32,000. So that is a drop from last year's attendance of 10,000 people.
How does this affect your contract with the fort?
Well, we signed our new 5-year agreement with them last November, and we certainly would not have signed the contract that we have now with gate fees, because what it does is effectively double the price of getting into the theater. So it's a violation of our agreement and all the other park permits that are in effect at Fort Steele.
You had no warning at all that the gate fees were going to be put on?
In November, not at all. The first we heard about it was in May when we had a meeting with Mr. Reed, and we didn't know how much the gate fees would be until late June. So it really came as a surprise. We thought if they would charge $1, it wouldn't have a great effect. But the $5 fee, the $10 family pass, which would be $20 next year, really is, I think, it's too much for the average family to pay to come to Fort Steele. 50% of the attendance at the theater has already seen the park, and if they were to continue this sort of fee structure, well, we're just losing those people. They're not going to come back.
Does it make a difference to the evening show that the price admission is off after 5 o'clock?
Well, a lot of people don't know that the price admission is off after 5 o'clock because it isn't being advertised. We're certainly telling people, and yes, we are getting an increase in the evening attendance. We're seeing the small babies and children and whatnot we normally see in the afternoon. But when you're playing to 128 people in an afternoon show where you're normally playing to 400, you don't pick up those kind of numbers in an evening performance because our evening performances are normally up fairly high anyway.
Are we going to see your troupe here in the future?
Well, right now we're in a process of trying to negotiate. Mr. Reed is away on conference right now, so we're certainly hoping that they're going to be fair and they're going to listen to our concerns because they are very grave concerns, and we would certainly like to be back because Fort Steele means a lot to us. We've been here for 11 years. The park staff have been fantastic. Mr. Martin Ross, who runs the park now, has really been so supportive, and we have a great team spirit here, and it would be just too bad if this were, all those years of effort were lost because of a marketing blunder.
Is there any chance of compensation?
Well, legally, yes, by all means, but that's something, again, that's going to have to be negotiated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy.
We're talking with Brian Tully today, President of the Chamber of Commerce in Cranbrook. How are you doing today, Brian?
Fine, Judy, just fine. How are you?
I was hoping you'd be able to tell us how you feel that the ticket admission price at Fort Steele has affected Cranbrook and Cranbrook businesses.
Well, it's interesting. Everybody's talking about the increase in admission prices at Fort Steele. There is no increase. There never has been admission prices before. And if you travel across Canada, we have these remarkable sights to see. And you pay for them all, except when you get to British Columbia. So how have the admission fees, the new admission fees affected Cranbrook? Not a great deal. We're finding that a lot of people are talking about them. We're finding a lot of people are still going out to the fort. They're perhaps not going twice like they've done in the past or 3 times, but they're going. I've talked to a lot of people who've come to Cranbrook on a normal visit and have stopped at Fort Steele and had a very good time. They've enjoyed it, and in the past they always said, gee, you know, we normally pay for this. Why is it not costing us any money here? So it's working out very well. We've heard a lot, not a lot, but a number of complaints from people directly related to the fort. But you see, the distance between Cranbrook and the fort creates a situation where we don't notice what's happening out there. As businessmen in the city of Cranbrook, we don't notice it. And that, of course, is perhaps the reason that we're not overly upset about it like people think we should be, but we're not.
So you're saying that businesses such as restaurants or that sort of thing, their business isn't down because there's an admission price at the fort?
How do you tell? A rainy day can take your business down more than the fort having people out there. You see, this part that fascinates me is if you go out to the fort to look at the show and you don't want to pay $5 to go in the gate and $5 to go to the show, so you do one or the other. So you go back in the evening for the show, or you go through the fort during the day and pay $5 or $10 for your whole family for the whole year. Inexpensive. Right. That's very inexpensive. Right. And if you do that, why would you not come to Cranbrook and still have dinner or stay in one of our motels or hotels, which are very good? And that's the part that gets me. How would it affect us? If you don't spend the money at Fort Steele is affected, but if you come to Cranbrook, you're still going to do it.
Yes. Very good. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Okay.
I'm speaking to Sue Campbell, who runs the Prospector print shop out at Fort Steele. Sue, how do you feel about the gate admission at Fort Steele?
As a concessionaire, we were opposed to it on two different fronts when it was implemented. We were hoping, in fact, that it would be put off until next year so that people got used to the idea, so that we were able to kind of plan for it. And secondly, we also are opposed to the $5 fees that are being asked of single adults who come in the park.
How has the gate admission affected your business and in numbers of people?
It's the first 2 weeks, of course, were the most obvious. We saw not as many people in the park, which definitely, of course, affected our revenue. I'm seeing it start to pick up again now, which is really nice. But naturally, that first 2 weeks is hard to make up, or probably impossible to make up at this point. And as I say, I'm seeing a few more people now. I would like to see a lot more people in the park.
How do you feel about the way the fees were implemented?
I think, as I said, I think first of all, it was a difficult thing to do in the middle of the season. People were immediately upset by it because all of a sudden here we are at the height of the season and in the middle of the season, and I'm speaking now about people who are coming into the park, probably especially your local people. And the one thing, of course, they took a look at was the $5 adult fee, which is high. It's quite high. In fact, the Seasons Pass, which is $10 per family per year, is a very reasonable figure. But that wasn't the first thing that was sort of discussed, or that wasn't the first thing that showed. And also, I think there's probably still a lot of people about who don't have a clue that after 5 o'clock it's free admission. And in fact, it is free admission. And there's still a lot happening after 5. So I think that was kind of a problem. I think as well with local people, we have the additional difficulty in that the park has been here since 1963. It has been kind of our park. It has always been free. It's been a place where you could take your family for a picnic, and there's never been a charge. And that's a difficult thing all of a sudden to have a charge implemented. And then as well, as I say, as well to have the most noticeable fee being the $5 and not knowing that it is free after 5 so that you can come in and go to the show or stop by the print shop or go to the tea room or Kershaw's or whatever. So,
what kind of changes or what do you see in the future as far as the fees go?
I'm sure the fees will stay on. I can't see at this point the government turning around. A great deal of time and money now has been spent implementing those fees. Whether or not they would consider reducing them, I don't know. I don't know at this point.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Oh, I
Take me to the station, gonna see my baby away. Don't want her, but I got to. Said she had to see LA. I guess you never really know, but you didn't ask me to go away. Take me to the doctor, somebody find LA. No standing here in silence, guess I'm ready, on my way. I don't really want to go, I don't know where to stay in LA. Answers to my questions, find out where she wants to stay. The shakers and the bakers, you know somebody's gonna pay. I don't really want to go, I don't know what to say in LA. To the station, I'm gonna leave today. I'm gonna find my baby somewhere in LA. I don't wanna go, don't know where I'll stay. I gotta see my baby today.
I'm talking with David Gibson today. He's the concessionaire at the East Kootenay Railway Company in Fort Steele. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining me. Maybe you could tell us a little bit how the railway is going this year, and have you noticed a drop or an increase in attendance this year on your railway?
We noticed a drop from the moment that the admission fees for the park generally were put on July the 15th. Up until then, we were a few percentage points ahead of last year's attendance. I think that more people have been coming to outlying parts of the province since Expo, attracted by Expo, and certainly the number of visitors here to the railway was up above last year up until the 14th of July. Since then, we've experienced a drop in ridership and a consequential drop in cash flow.
I see. And that's, you feel, directly attributed to the admission fees?
Yes, we've been told that repeatedly by customers. I don't think that people very much mind having an admission fee, and I know that the park can use the admission fees for restoration of more buildings and adding more programs. I was very interested to notice many of our American visitors come to us in the early part of the summer and say, why is there not an admission fee? We're used to paying those at home. If they went to ride on the railway at the Henry Ford Museum, for example, they'd end up paying quite a bit higher rate to get into the Deerfield Park, and then yet more for each attraction. I have the feeling that it's not so much the fees that have cut down the ridership. It's the fact that the fees are new.
Yes.
And we have to struggle to overcome that. We have added an extra run late in the day because we have found that there is a pool of people who wait outside the park gates until the admission fees are dropped at 5 p.m. And so a few of those come up here, enough to make it worth our while running an extra trip at the end of the day. But that doesn't always catch us up to what our normal daily expectations would be compared to last year's ridership.
You say there's a drop in ridership. Is that attributable mostly to local people coming out to the park, or do you think right generally across the board?
I think some of each. For example, on the August long weekend, when we had the 100th anniversary celebration of Fort Steele, we had crowds that we have never experienced before in the 3 years that I've been the concessionaire here. The day before and the day after, they dropped quite sharply. I think it's quite clear that not as many local people are coming as often as they used to. But generally speaking, the attendance at the park is down by a small amount. I don't know those figures. The consequence, though, of the $5 or $10 individual or family charge at the front gate is that those people, once having paid that, have exactly that much less to spend during the course of their 2-hour or 4-hour visit to the park, and certainly we suffer as a result.
Right. But you will persevere.
Oh yes, we're here for the duration. We have a 5-year contract. Right. We had very tough times in our first year here in 1985. I'm sure you'll remember the very heavy forest fire situation right here. That cut our attendance back very dramatically during the month of July of 85. It picked up somewhat in August of 85. Last year was a benchmark year for us. It was fairly steady business. And we have the 1986 figures to look back on when we're comparing them with this year. And we're down a measurable amount, and yes, it is hurting us.
Do you feel, though, ultimately it's going to be of benefit to you and the park? Or at least a necessity? Maybe I should rephrase that.
I think that given the increasing cost of heritage restoration and preservation, I mean, you pay very high fees to architects and skilled craftsmen and things like that. Yes, I think that an admission fee is probably long overdue. I think that the instituting it all at once and in the middle of the season has been very difficult for all of the concessionaires.
Good. Well, I thank you very much for talking with me today.
Thanks for joining us.
Good.
good. Do you have a few minutes? Okay. Now, I'm speaking to Ann Debreczeni at Fort Steele. Ann, would you tell me how the gate admissions have affected your business here at Fort Steele?
Well, I am down. There's no way that we can avoid that. I am down well over 25%, although you can't get an exact figure, of course, until the end of the month. But on the 15 days in July, I was over 30% down, and there hasn't been very much of a marked improvement this month so far.
Were the gate admissions discussed with you before they were implemented?
No. We did send, as the Merchants Council, we sent letters suggesting different, like, being in the field, being the people that the public meet, trying to tell the government just what the people would. We sort of figured that this would happen. Well, any economics books you check will say that an admission fee will make a drop in attendance, and it just made a rather larger drop in attendance than anyone had, or at least in the end result here in my store, put it that way, because we are not told the gate entrances, and that's been denied to us for reasons that, of course, the government must know best, I guess. We are down. What can I say?
Ann, as chairman of the Merchants Council at Fort Steele, could you mention some of the other concessions and how they have been affected by the gate admissions?
Well, all of us are down. There's 6 of us here. There's the Prospector newspaper, and the Stagecoach, and Tink and Judy at the Wild Horse show, our train man, and the tea room up above the museum, and of course the snack bar, which is part of theirs. And we are all down. Some of them have only just the 2 months. Like the theater, if they don't make it in July and August, that's it. And the Prospector is open a shorter season than myself in the tea room. And the Stagecoach, of course, only runs during the peak seasons as well. So that's all the time. And you can never get back anything that if you have a bad season, that's it. It's never going to come back, ever. We have, between us, have laid off 6 people, an equivalent of 6 people, either laid off completely, not hired extras that we should have been, or else people that should be working 8 hours a day are working 4. We're all running on rather... We do a lot of work running, put it this way, because there's not enough work to have the extra person we need, and yet we are very busy. You know, like just with fewer of us, we are stretched thinner, put it that way. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Help me, will you lend me a heart or two? I've been restless, mainly guessless. I've been told that I'd like you. A little holding, a little squeezing, not so much to a woman like you. A little knowing, a little showing, a little thinking is the best I can do. All I ever wanted was a girl like you, who could take my little heart and break it right in two. Been looking